Houston, energy capital of the Western world. It's an inland port tucked away behind the Gulf of Mexico. It ranks first in the United States in international commerce.
Everything in Houston is brought here by sea.
Of course, the city's economy is driven by petroleum. And it's no surprise that the city planners designed it around the extensive use of the automobile.
It wasn't necessarily built on oil, but it grew on oil.
With nothing to stop its urban sprawl, Houston is simply immense. In fact, its territory is about the size of New York, San Francisco, Seattle, Minneapolis, and Miami combined. And it just seems like everything in Houston is big. Highways, buildings, cars, food, and rodeos.
We do feel like we're an economic impact of about a Super Bowl every year.
But although Houston has 5 city centers, it's known for its small-town attitude and the charm that comes with it.
You need $100,000 in New York to buy what $40,000 in Houston buys you.
Houston is considered to be one of the energy capitals of the world, and it certainly keeps the gas pumps full in most American cities. Up until 1900, the region's main port was in Galveston, but it was destroyed by one of the most devastating hurricanes to ever hit the U.S. The port was rebuilt in the up-and-coming city of Houston. In 1901, oil was struck in the region, and there was an explosion of wealth and population. Today, the Port of Houston is the world's largest petrochemical complex.
Somewhere in the 1800s, where the port of Galveston was the main route in and out for trade, the Galvestonians were not exactly very friendly to the Houstonians, who were trying to bring in trade from the inland parts of the country. So the people in Houston decided that, hey, we are going to bypass them and we're going to build a channel that will come up here, and they use the river. It's an amazing feat that they achieved, where we are bringing ships all the way. Where we started with the Sam Houston, next stop is downtown Houston. You can't go up any further than that.
The Houston Ship Channel is an 80-kilometer link between the inland port and the sea. Like everything in Houston, the channel is huge.
Everything in Houston is brought here by sea in general. We have a lot of industry, so does Houston depend on the port here? Absolutely. Because everything that we have here and that we manufacture here and that we refine here, that we export from here, is all dependent on the port either bringing it in or taking it out again.
Is Galveston still used as a port?
Port of Galveston is operating, but at a much lower scale than the Port of Houston does.
What commodities go through the Port of Houston?
Probably the biggest commodity that comes through here is steel products, as in pipes, plates, beams, things like that, mainly in the construction and in the oil and gas industry. The Port of Houston has several different terminals. They also have the Jacinto Port facility and the Care Terminal facility, which are, I believe, leased out to other parties to operate. But these are the ones that Port of Houston Authority controls. Besides that, there are several private terminals. And of course, the oil industry has their own terminals. They're all private.
After the oil crash in the 80s, Houston had to diversify its economy. How did that translate to here in the activity in the port?
They didn't concentrate only in terms of energy. They brought in a lot of other needs. For example, the technology industry. Even though it's not so apparent, Houston is also very much in the forefront of the technology industry and that service as well, and that's where it came to. You had to leave the energy industry.
If you don't have a car in Houston, chances are you won't be doing a whole lot. The city is just too big, 23,000 square kilometers.
So they call Houston the Petro Metro. How important is the oil industry to the city?
It's huge. I mean, you look around and you can definitely see how important it is. A lot of the major companies that have facilities here, their headquarters are out west in what's called the Energy Corridor, and it follows a freeway out there, kind of in between two freeways. The city, it wasn't necessarily built on oil, but it grew on oil, and it's still very, very heavily dependent.
Unlike most cities, when the price of oil spikes, there's an economic boom in Houston. A century's worth of booms has resulted in a huge influx of workers, incredible building spurts, and the massive scale of growth.
In 1901, they discovered oil at Spindletop, which is outside of Beaumont. That was the first oil in Texas, the first major discovery, and our proximity to Beaumont. And Houston had been building, dredging this channel anyway. In 1900, once Galveston was wiped out by the hurricane, and they realized there was a need for a port or a major city that was in a less precarious position. And the discovery of oil, kind of all that happened at once. I mean, I think it's really like anything else. It was just a matter of timing. If you're not directly involved, a lot of it is you can be indirectly involved. There's a lot of manufacturing that goes for the oil and gas industry. There's a lot of crossover with other industries, the aerospace and aeronautics. You can be in the shipping industry and not necessarily be in the oil and gas industry, but still have a lot of oil and gas business. So, you know, the core might be this big, but the spread is much, much bigger.
Apparently when oil prices go up, the rest of the country is devastated, but Houstonians and Texans are happy.
You know, people spend more, the economy, it's kind of a good cycle. So you understand that you're paying more at the pump, but you also, I mean, we're not like lawyers that we like bad things to happen but we're fortunate in the sense that when oil prices do go up and when gas prices do go up, we get benefits that some other cities and places in the country don't get. I've heard the energy capital. Natural gas is huge right now in the States, and it's probably going to define the next 20 or 30 years of our energy policy. It's hard to say things like that in the superlative because, I mean, there are other huge, huge cities and industries, you know, elsewhere. I would say Houston is one of the hubs of the global energy network for sure, and it's definitely the energy capital of this country and perhaps this continent. There are a lot of majors here who have their biggest operations here or their North American headquarters here.
Houston, like our cars, runs on gasoline. It processes more than 35% of all petroleum used in the U.S. But this begs the question, what happens to Houston when the oil runs out and the cars are fueled by something else?
Well, I mean, I think what's next for us is probably what's next for the rest of the country and to the rest of the world. We have a lot of land in West Texas and North Texas that's good for harnessing wind power, and the wind industry is really going strong here. We have the fastest growing in terms of like new installations in the country, and it was big for us to pass California because California is always kind of on the leading edge of the green thing. Houston's in a good place because we have so much brain power here from the energy industry, NASA, the medical industry. I mean, we've got some of the smartest minds in the world who, not necessarily from here, but they've come to work here and live here. And I think whatever comes next, we'll be pretty quick to jump on it and capitalize on it. It's still an oil town, and it will be an oil town for a long time. And even probably after it's no longer strictly an oil town, it will be referred to as an oil town for even longer.
If there's one thing that Houston knows, it's energy in every form. Believe it or not, it's also a leader in the development and promotion of green energy. Maybe it already understood that its fuel is far from being eternal or renewable. Today, the 5 million cars that jam its freeways run on gas. But Houston is determined to change and become a model city for the use of electric cars.
We're making efforts to get involved with that. Reliant and its parent company, NRG, and the city have recently been getting involved. I know they're converting some Toyota Priuses from hybrids to plug-in electrics, and Nissan is in here for, they're doing a Nissan is helping the city and Reliant do a deal where they build rechargeable stations throughout the city because, I mean, the infrastructure's got to come first before the product really takes off. Something like that's coming. It's just and not just in Houston, but you just have to make it easy for people and affordable for people. Otherwise, it won't happen. And you know, I mean, one of the things about Houston is oil and gas for so long has been so easy and so affordable. We're big energy consumers, but we're also big energy producers. So that kind of really went hand in hand. So I mean, Texas has really made strides with renewable energy in terms of wind, and we're trying to get into solar. There are some roadblocks with affordability, with kind of scale, and the government gets in the way a little bit, or it helps out a little bit, depending on how you look at it. But, you know, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we're at the forefront of whatever's next. That's probably the most unique aspect of Houston, is it is a major, major, major metropolitan area that really has no boundaries in terms of what can be built where. A lot of people hate it, a lot of people love it, a lot of people think there are good and bad aspects of it, but personally, I think there's more good than bad.
On the upside, although the city is gigantic, it's a warm and friendly place for families. Oil keeps it well financed, so the cost of living is low. And these are great conditions for a young middle-income family looking for their dollar to go far. On the downside, if walking gets you nowhere, biking doesn't get you much further. And public transport, surprisingly, is nowhere near as developed as it should be. There's no subway system in Houston, and some say public transport is almost non-existent. The city center alone is more than 600 square kilometers. Compare that to the island of Manhattan, only 23 square kilometers. To cross Houston, there's one very important thing you need besides a car and a full tank, and that's patience.
Houston has always been very proud of its freedom in everyday life and in construction development. But there was no one imposing rules and regulations preventing people from building anything anywhere. There are some nice neighborhoods because they have some regulations, so you can't build just anything. We're inside Houston's main perimeter. This is the West Loop, Highway 610 that goes around Houston.
It's a big area, but if you're taking a taxi anywhere within its limits, you only have to pay a flat rate of $6, no matter the distance or traffic conditions.
We're next to the Galleria, the largest shopping mall in the city, and this is Williams Tower. Architect Philip Johnson has done many projects in Houston, and the tower with the fountain are two of his last projects.
Surprisingly, there are a number of poetic elements in this city of concrete. And Houstonians are well in need of this breath of fresh air, as the average summer temperature here is 33 degrees Celsius. Houston has been described as the most air-conditioned place on Earth. And I think that's a fair assessment. There are air conditioners in every car, building, and room I visit. The invention of this helpful device in the 1950s helped change construction radically in this very hot city.
It really changed things here. The city grew tremendously because it allowed people to be comfortable in the summer, and it allowed people to continue working through the summer. In Houston, summers are incredibly hot and humid. Humidity hits in May and stays all the way to Christmas. So now, people can leave their office at lunchtime, go eat and shop in the tunnels, and then go back to the office without ever having to go outside.
Without air conditioning, there would be no high-rises here. It's just too hot. During the summer, people who work in this 10-kilometer section of the city barely ever step outside. They use the network of temperature-controlled tunnels to escape the heat, making Houston's streets practically empty.
Most of the architectural development, like the high-rises, were built in the 70s. Houston's economy was always based on oil, which has always kept the city going.
There's a little obstacle that makes Houston's expansion difficult. The city is built on 4 major bayous. This can make urban planning a tricky business.
A bayou is a little river that flows very slowly. Normally, bayous drain the city. However, Houston is very flat, so they accumulate a lot of water. When it rains, the water is drained very slowly, as the bayous take the water down to the Gulf of Mexico. There are dams on the bayous a little further down to prevent the complete flooding of the city. But even with that, if it rains too hard or too fast, we can have serious problems.
S'il pleut trop vite et trop dur, on peut avoir des problèmes.
The underground flooding has had an impact on the cityscape. As it's impossible to build parking spaces underground, the countless cars get towers of their own. Buildings like this have become part of the city's identity. Of course, the city's also known for a completely different kind of transportation: into outer space. Houston is the home of NASA's Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center, where every detail of American space missions are planned. I had the opportunity of speaking with astronaut Julie Payette between her training sessions. She explains the role of the Space Center in the city.
Tout le monde sait que Houston est associé avec.
Everyone knows that Houston is linked to the space missions. Many of the people living here are involved in the aerospace industry because NASA's Johnson Space Center employs more than 13,000 people. Every morning, all these people come in through the front gate. But there are also lots of people working in the plants, in the oil industry, the refineries, in Texas City or Pasadena.
Qui sont autour et qui travaillent aussi
The Space Center gave the area a boost, a pride that it didn't have. This area used to be very rural. There was nothing in Clear Lake. And then NASA came in the 60s. And the first astronauts that came here when NASA set up its installation were the ones that went to the moon on the Apollo mission. So Neil Armstrong and the others, they all lived around here somewhere.
quelque part.
While in Houston, I called a good friend of mine, the space-savvy Chris Hadfield, who is none other than the first Canadian commander of the International Space Station. He agreed to take me on an exclusive tour of the complex. He brings me to Mission Control, the famous nerve center of every American space mission, the place where Neil Armstrong's words were first heard.
This is the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. It's the place from which all the historical missions were controlled since the 1960s. From here, we control and communicate with the shuttles and now with the orbiting space station. Over there, we can see the cameras that are outside the space station. Today, as we can see, there are about 20 people working here, supervising all the experiments in orbit. But there are other rooms where the experts and specialists are also working. Altogether, it's probably more than 150 people that work here to ensure that the station, its systems, and the astronauts are in good condition 24 hours a day.
The work done by spacebound astronauts is in fact mostly done on Earth. They spend a great deal of their time planning and rehearsing their missions right here in Houston.
Go ahead, try it.
Okay, I can see.
Virtual reality is used here to simulate spacewalks. Wish me luck.
Maintenant?
Okay. Yep. Yeah, give me your left, your left. Hello.
Navette, exactement la même grandeur.
And here's the shuttle. It's exactly the same size as the real one. Houston is really Space City, chosen 40 years ago by President Lyndon Johnson as the place where astronauts would be prepared for their missions.
Choisi par le président dans ce temps-là, Lyndon Johnson.
Houston was chosen as NASA's headquarters in part because its port could deal with the transport of the huge components required to build the machinery and simulated environments required for space expeditions. Of course, the fact that the president at the time was a Texan probably didn't hurt.
Imagine being in Houston and hearing the first words from the moon. Houston, Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed. The first human being on the moon was Neil Armstrong, who trained here in this building. He said the word Houston, and each time they asked a question from the station, they would start with Houston, station. So it isn't only a pride, it's also part of our history when we say that the first steps started here in Houston. NASA is everywhere. NASA Hair Salon, NASA Souvenirs, NASA Road 1, NASA Parkway. It's part of the normal dialogue here.
So you need to get in on your knees, sort of, and then swing, and there's all sorts of things on the floor to trip on, so be very careful getting in. Do it like this.
Okay.
Donc, vous êtes dans la siège.
Now you're in the shuttle commander's seat.
C'est pour contrôler la navette avec...
You control the shuttle with the right hand and the propulsion with the left.
Cape Canaveral,
Cape Canaveral and Cape Kennedy are used to launch the astronauts and satellites into space with rockets.
Avec les fusées. C'est à cause de...
By launching from the east side of the United States, we can use the Earth's speed. Because the Earth spins, there is a surface speed, and we always launch towards the east to use that speed.
Et donc on lance toujours vers l'est à cause de la vitesse de la Terre. Mais ça c'est pour le lancement.
But that's the launch. Before you get there, you need years of preparation. That's the difference between Nassau Kennedy in Florida and Nassau Johnson in Texas. Houston is where we prepare things and where we prepare ourselves as astronauts. There's an astronaut here, Shannon Walker, who will be part of our next mission. She was born here and went to university here. She became an astronaut here at the Space Center, and in a few months, she'll be flying into space. She had that dream as a girl, as a student, and she's an example of the possibilities of living in Houston and having a life in this unique place.
A little bonus? Chris takes me on a plane ride over the city. Stunning. A volunteer for the Houston Rodeo since 1982, Joe Bruce has moved up the ranks to become its general manager. He tells me about the rodeo, which began in 1932 and grew into one of the world's largest.
Houston at that time was a huge livestock producing area, and they just wanted the community to be more aware of what they did, and international guests and anyone else that they could do, and they went downtown in the Coliseum and started a rodeo.
Is the Houston Rodeo the biggest rodeo in the world?
Houston Rodeo is the biggest rodeo in North America. There are probably some rodeos somewhere that are bigger. It's the biggest purse for a regular event. And when we say that, we're a PRCA event, Pro Rodeo Cowboy Association. They have a finals in Las Vegas called the NFR, to where they give away about $5 million, $5.5. It's the top 15 athletes for a 10-day run. We're here, we're giving out $1.5 million, and that's the biggest rodeo in North America, the biggest purse. We have the biggest event when you add our horse shows, commercial exhibits, youth exhibits, and our rodeo. we are the biggest event.
Much more than a gathering of cowboys and cowgirls, the rodeo is an important part of Houston's economy and culture. It even plays a role in the education system.
The Houston Rodeo is a charity. You give out scholarships. It's up to $11.2 million, if I'm not mistaken.
We give out direct payments, which are to our exhibitors. They bring an animal in here, and they run through a competition, and the top animals are sold at auction. And those auctions will result in about $6 million directly going to the exhibitor. Then we give out another $10.5 million in scholarships at $15,000 apiece to the youth of Texas that has applied for them. We give out about $16.5 million annually.
Do you find that the rodeo is a good reflection of the city of Houston?
The rodeo is an amazing event that the city of Houston embraces, and we kind of are the city of Houston. We've got 22,000 volunteers that take off work, give up vacation, come out here and spend their time and their money creating a venue that supports the youth of Texas. And about 60 to 70% of our revenue comes from our volunteers. So it's something the city gets behind and the people truly support. We'll have 2 million people through here in a 25-day run. We'll put 1.2 million in our stadium as a rodeo ticket buyer.
What are the total sales of the Houston Rodeo?
Roughly $82 to $85 million. We do feel like we're an economic impact of about a Super Bowl every year. We're bringing in $300 to $350 million to the city of Houston every year. The majority of our people come from what we call our metro area, which is the county of Harris County, and the 7 counties that surround it. So there's probably 90% of our people that come from those 7 counties.
How come the rodeo is in Houston and not in some other city in Texas?
Well, the other cities have rodeos, and they have events that are supported by volunteers, but we have a city of 4 million people, and it's amazing the support that we get from them, not only through the local businesses that give their employees the time off to come support us, and our city has just gotten behind this event and supported it at a totally different level than some of the other Texas cities. Even though they do great work and also support the youth of Texas, we just do it in a grand way here.
In Texas, cowboys are celebrities. The sport is so popular that children can start training at the age of 6. You may have guessed it, at that age, they don't ride bulls or bucking broncos. This is called mutton bustin'. The rodeo's livestock show is the driving element behind cattle breeding for a good part of the country. Whole herds are raised just for resale right here at the rodeo.
Hey, you want a prize?
Yeah.
Congratulations. What, 5th place?
Yes.
And what was it for?
Class 26 lightweight crosses. Pigs.
Is your pig right here?
No,
That one?
it's already in their hands now.
He's drinking champagne?
He's drinking champagne.
Congratulations.
That's the champion shorthorn in the steer platform.
I live in Groover, Texas, a little bitty place north of Amarillo.
How far is that from here?
10 hours driving. Long ways. in this industry, there's Houston's like I guess you'd say the mecca of livestock shows. Everyone likes to claim that they have a big one, but Houston actually has the numbers and the economy to support it. People from the community come in and they have an auction for the top end animals, and they give to the kids. And most of the time, we like to hope it's used for education, and that's why they do it. And it's kind of to reward them for their hard work. It takes our family, a lot of money to live for 10 days away from home. So it's a big economic boost for Houston. And Houston repays. It's a very generous city and a good place. So there's 5,000 show pigs that show up, exhibitors. So 5,000 kids just with show products, and it brings in the largest amount of revenue for any livestock show out there. You know, everyone likes to say everything's bigger and better in Texas, and sometimes that's right and sometimes it's not, but that's how we feel about the town of Houston.
My cousin Tara has lived in Houston for over 10 years. And like everyone else here, she works in the space industry. She wanted to give me a gastronomical tour of the rodeo. Like I said, everything is bigger here.
La bouffe en tant que telle, c'est très frit.
Food here is often deep fried, and it comes in large portions. Everything is enormous.
Everything's bigger, and it's also deep fried.
Everyone here eats deep fried food. Everyone has a deep fryer at home.
Deep fried hot dogs, deep fried turkey, deep fried chocolate bars, deep fried ice cream.
There's fried everything right there. The banana split free, fried Snicker bars, fried cheesecake, and fried Twinkies, and fried Oreos. It's heaven.
How do you deep fry ice cream?
You freeze it hard, you put it in a special batter, and you fry it. This is fried Oreos and a fried Snicker candy bar.
Ça se vend dans tous les genres de
You can get this kind of stuff in all the events and trade shows in Houston and in Texas.
Until recently, these eating habits made Houstonians the most obese people in the world. Now it seems, things are changing. This is rodeo food, and it's only a small part of Houston's rich culinary mix. With a reputation for diversity and excellence, Houston has over 8,000 restaurants, more per capita than almost any other American city.
Sure.
Well, what can I say? It's in my job description to be curious. A little taste test, perhaps? Deep fried ice cream, deep fried Snickers bar, and get this, deep fried cheesecake. Lucky for anyone eating deep fried ice cream on a daily basis, Houston also boasts the world's largest medical center.
Vous avez 48 institutions.
There are 48 institutions on an immense space in the south of Houston. 13 different hospitals, 2 medical faculties, 4 nursing faculties. There are more than 80,000 people that work in this medical center, as well as 16,000 researchers and 60,000 students that come here to study each year. It's astronomical. If you add to that the 140,000 visitors that come on the campus every day, you get a picture of the place. Everything is focused on the treatment of the patients and on research and education. The medical center has very important mandates.
I've been surprised by many things so far in Houston, but I certainly didn't expect to find such a liberal attitude, impressive social innovations, and open-mindedness.
Ici, il faut savoir que les soins de santé ne sont pas un droit.
You have to realize that here in the U.S., health services aren't a basic right, they're a consumer product. And this makes things complex when you need to obtain health services. I have seen so many people put all their savings in health care for the father or the grandfather or grandmother. People sell their cars and even their houses to pay for health care. The cost of health services is one of the leading causes of personal bankruptcy in the country. But here, generated profits are reinvested in the domain.
As I visit the Houston Medical Center, I quickly realize that this is a one-of-a-kind place when it comes to health services. The medical center is the size of a small city, and it operates as a non-profit organization. Very, very surprising considering the state of healthcare in America.
A lot of money is invested in the medical center. The investment plan for the period between 2008 and 2012 represents about $12 billion. And year after year, this medical center brings in more than $10 billion for the Houston region. The people who come to the medical center to work or to receive services or care reflect the city's cultural diversity. The company I work in employs more than 16,000 people. More than 1,000 of these people are from China and came here to work. About 800 are from India. Several hundreds are from the Philippines. And the list goes on.
Plusieurs centaines viennent des Philippines et on peut continuer la liste pour plusieurs pays, plusieurs continents.
Recruitment is based on qualifications and capacity to carry out the work, and that promotes an environment of open-mindedness and tolerance.
Et de ce point de vue-là, c'est un milieu très, très ouvert, très tolérant.
Open and tolerant. A great description of the medical center, but also of the city and its citizens. This is certainly making me rethink the classic image of the horse-wrangling, hay-chewing Texan cowboy. Since 1982, Steve Kleinberg has headed a survey of Houston's demographic and economic changes and how they affect its residents. His study has become a gauge of local attitudes and idiosyncrasies.
According to your survey, Houston is a much better place to live than other cities in the U.S. Why?
People in Houston think it is. Well, it's two reasons. One is people who live here love it here. It's the least expensive major city in America. You need $100,000 in New York to buy what $40,000 in Houston buys you in terms of shelter, food. We have wonderful restaurants, tremendous diversity, but manageable because we live in our little special worlds. And then right now, we're in the midst of a serious recession. Houston is also in recession, but it's much better here than it is in almost any other part of the country.
Houston, it turns out, is far from being the conservative place we make it to be. I'd even say it's a leader in social originality. The proof? It was the first American city to elect an openly homosexual and female mayor.
Last year you elected a lesbian mayor?
Yes, in a way that was fascinating because it was absolutely irrelevant to the whole process. We elected a mayor who had been city council person, who had been city controller, who was well known to the city, was one of the most knowledgeable people in the whole city on economic issues and fiscal challenges, and we knew that Houston was facing tremendous economic challenges, as all cities are in North America these days. And that's why she was elected. She was clearly the most competent person for Houston. People were shocked, and I got calls from New York Times and Christian Science Monitor. How could you do this? This is Houston. The whole point was that this.
That you said, this is Houston.
What's the deal?
This is
Yeah,
Houston.
you guys just don't understand how much this city has evolved and how much it has sort of embraced the 21st century.
But prejudice is still very present in the southern United States, in Texas, and in Houston.
People who live in Houston love it here. I mean, in our surveys, they complain about traffic, they complain about pollution, they complain about the weather, they complain about crime. And we said, how would you rate the Houston area as a place to live? It's a wonderful place to live. 80% say wonderful. So people here like it, but they recognize that the perception of Houston outside the city is really not very positive, right? And it's all based on the Houston of the oil boom, the Houston of the bravado, and when it was a whole other country, when Houston was booming in the 1970s with a tenfold increase in the value of oil, and everywhere else in the country had this major economic recession. And so people still have a negative view of Houston outside of the city.
It's not really a tourist city.
And it isn't. It's trying to be. It's got a few things. We have NASA. We have a big convention center. We have a wonderful theater and extraordinary museums and so on. But no, it is not a tourist city.
You wouldn't associate Houston with culture and cinemas and operas and I don't know, it's just not the perception we would have.
That's right, but that's a false perception. In fact, Houston has more theater seats than any other city in the United States outside of New York. More theater seats than Los Angeles. And world-class opera and ballet and symphony and repertory theater, but it isn't perceived as much. But people are coming to recognize this fourth largest city in America and increasingly recognizing it as one of the major cities in North America. There were bumper stickers in the 70s here. I remember one that said, "Drive fast, freeze a Yankee." I should not have said that, but that was part of that history that affects, I think, still today, the perceptions of people outside the city about this very different city that is Houston.
How do you compare Houston to other cities in Texas?
Dallas is much more a Texas city, and Houston, throughout all of its history, was an international city. It was the place, the world capital for energy production, when energy was oil and gas, and it still is, of course. One of the great challenges for Houston is, can we remain the energy capital when we move out of oil and gas into wind and solar and all of those other non-carbon-based energy systems that will be the central systems of the 21st century? But Houston, because it was the oil center and the energy center and the second largest port in the country, the 6th largest port in the world, this has been an international city, open to new ideas and open to new people in a way that is different and has a different feel than Dallas or San Antonio or Austin, that are more sort of traditional cities. Austin, of course, has the university, so that changes some of its dynamics as well.
And Houston became a symbolic city when the first word spoken on the moon was Houston.
That's right. One of the key moments in Houston's history was on October 7th, 1999, when Houston surpassed Los Angeles in the number of dangerously polluted days. And the headline in the USA Today newspaper was, "Houston, cough, cough. We've got a problem, cough, cough." And Houston has now sort of the business community that used to believe that environmental regulations were anti-growth and anti-business, now understand that environmental regulations are essential to economic prosperity.
Prior to the oil boom of the 80s, Houston was a destination of choice for English-speaking immigrants. But that has changed drastically over the last few decades. While 70% of locals over the age of 60 speak English, this is true of only 20% of the people under the age of 30.
People are always shocked by the extraordinary ethnic transformation that has occurred. People still think of this as an Anglo-dominated Texas town, and Houston is the most ethnically diverse city in the country. All the growth of Houston in the last 25 years has been immigration and the children of immigrants from Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the Caribbean. And this biracial southern city has become one of the most ethnically diverse cities in the country. There's 39% Hispanic, it is 35% Anglo, it is about 19% African American, and about 7% Asian.
Houston attracts many outsiders because it has so many jobs to offer. Whether in the medical center, the petrochemical industry, or in the construction of buildings and roadways, hard workers are always welcome. Even illegal immigrants play a vital role in the labor market here.
You know, there's 1.8 million illegal workers in Texas. Partnership here did a study to measure what would happen to the Texas economy if you rounded up those 1.8 million workers and sent them back to Mexico and El Salvador. And the answer is it would decimate the Texas economy. Houston has a more even distribution among the 4 great communities of America than any of the other multi-ethnic melting pot cities, something we haven't talked about before. One of the things I love about Houston is that there are very few Asians in Miami. There are very few African Americans in Los Angeles. This is where those great communities meet in greater balance, greater equality. All of us minorities, all of us called on to build something new under the sun. A truly successful, inclusive, multi-ethnic society that will be Houston and Texas and America in the 21st century.
Houston is like nothing you'd imagine. The vital and constantly evolving energy sector has brought it wealth. And its forward-looking industry will certainly continue to drive the continent's energy needs. It looks to the stars, and it looks after its citizens. I'd call it a bubble of liberal attitude in a traditionally conservative South. Charm and hospitality are as big as its buildings and portion sizes. Everything here is big, and I think there are more big things to come for this city of cowboys.